Good day, everyone. Thank you for watching my presentation. My name is Anastasia, and today I will be presenting on ATP production, which is the fuel for athletic performance. As the semester has gone on, I've realized how important ATP is for energy, and I was particularly interested in how this acts in relation to athletic performance. To start things out, I'd like to discuss why studying ATP matters. For the more personal side of things, I'm a competitive athlete who plans to compete at the D1 level, and I'm constantly training for my sport. I'd like to develop my own understanding of how energy is made, used, and sustained in athletic performance, and I think it is important for me to know how my body functions and the way it does. As for the more scientific side of things, it directly correlates with the introductory biology topics we've covered so far this semester. I think that understanding cellular respiration and ATP is important as it is a prevalent part of our bodies in day-to-day life when it comes to activities. What exactly is adenosine triphosphate? Well, it is known as the energy currency of the cell. It is a 5-carbon ribose sugar with 3 phosphate groups. ATP stores and transfers energy for cellular processes. The energy that ATP provides comes from the breakage of a phosphate group off of the ATP, turning it into a lower energy molecule called adenosine triphosphate, or ADP, plus an inorganic phosphate group, or PI. The process by which ATP is made is through a cycle called cellular respiration. The chemical formula for this is sugar plus 6 oxygen, which breaks down into 6 carbon dioxide plus 6 water molecules. When it comes to making energy for an organism to live and function, this is where it happens. Cellular respiration has 4 cycles: glycolysis, pyruvate oxidation, the Krebs or citric acid cycle, oxidative phosphorylation. To start, let's talk about the glycolysis step. Glycolysis happens in the cytoplasm of a cell. The cytoplasm is found in every cell, so there are no special regions needed for this process. The function of glycolysis is to split the glucose molecules, the sugar, into 2 pyruvate molecules. This releases energy to make 4 ATP and carry energy into the next process. This occurs both in anaerobic and aerobic conditions. The inputs of the step are glucose 2 ATP, 4 ADP, and 2 NAD+, and the outputs are 2 net ATP, 2 NADH, and 2 pyruvate. In glycolysis, there are 2 phases. First, the energy investment phase, which is where 2 ATP molecules are consumed, and secondly, there's an energy payoff phase, which is when the 2 other ATP are created and the NADH plus gets reduced into NADH, giving the process its net energy. Next is the pyruvate oxidation step. This happens in the mitochondrial matrix. The mitochondria is found in all muscle cells, so we don't have to worry about what would happen if the mitochondria wasn't found in a cell. The function of this step is to oxidize the 2 pyruvates from the glycolysis step to make 2 acetyl-coenzyme A molecules. This process only occurs in aerobic conditions. The input in this step are 2 pyruvate and 2 NAD+, and the outputs are 2 acetyl-coenzyme A and 2 NADH. The acetyl-coenzyme A is important for cellular respiration because it transfers the high levels of energy needed to complete making ATP. After that comes the Krebs or citric acid cycle. This step also occurs in the mitochondrial matrix. The function of this step is to further break down pyruvate to produce ATP and to store electrons in NADH and FADH2. These act as electron transporters, which help carry the energy to the last step. This step also only occurs in aerobic conditions. There are a lot that occurs in the cycle, and as you can see in the picture, there are plenty of different inputs and outputs in the stage. The specific inputs per 1 acetyl-coenzyme to enter into the cycle are acetyl-CoA, 3 NAD+, 1 FAD+, and 1 ADP. The outputs are 3 reduced NADH, 1 reduced FADH2, 1 ATP, and 2 carbon dioxide. Our final stage is the oxidative phosphorylation. This step occurs in the inner membrane space of the mitochondria, and the function of the step is to utilize the energy/electrons stored in NADH and FADH2 to make ATP. Oxidative phosphorylation only occurs in aerobic conditions. There are 2 important components to the stage: the electron transport chain, or ETC, and the ATP synthase. The ETC shuttles electrons from NADH and FADH2 to oxygen. Oxygen is a major reactant in the oxidative phosphorylation, and within the mitochondrial membrane, hydrogen ions make a hydrogen gradient, together with oxygen creating a protein gradient, and H plus creating a hydrogen gradient, the H plus ions then move into the mitochondrial matrix via facilitated diffusion. Kinetic energy from this movement provides the energy to make ATP. The ATP synthase then catalyzes the formation of ATP from ADP to plus a phosphate group. Also using the hydrogen gradient, the hydrogen ions move across the synthase to provide energy for the catalyzing to occur. The final product of this process will be around 34 net ATP. The next important thing that needs to be highlighted before we look at ATP within the body is anaerobic versus aerobic respiration. With the topics we've covered, aerobic is oxygen-based, whereas anaerobic is without oxygen. Cellular respiration within the muscles ideally uses aerobic processes. Aerobic uses oxygen and glucose to convert carbohydrates into carbon dioxide and water products. If you remember a couple slides ago, we saw the chemical formula for cellular respiration. This is just the word-based version of it. As we've seen, this is a main process for cellular respiration, and it makes plenty of ATP. The products from this process are easily released and disposed of or used by the body. Carbon dioxide we breathe out, and water is used for a multitude of processes in the body. As for anaerobic, this is when our bodies rely on our stored energy sources. For example, glucose. This process doesn't need oxygen and is referred to as fermentation. Lactic acid fermentation is what occurs in our body's muscles. Glucose breaks down into lactic acid and our body goes into an oxygen debt. Oxygen debt is, for example, after completing a HIIT workout when your body has very little time to consume oxygen. So it uses a form of anaerobic respiration but builds up lactic acid. Lactic acid is toxic, so after this intense workout, you need to breathe deeper in order to get back to the required oxygen to break down toxicity. Moving on to ATP within the muscles, there are 3 energy systems: ATP PCR, glycolysis or glycolytic, and oxidative. Each of these play an important role within exercise and energy. Take note of the image as this is a guide for which the process is complete, what and at what times. Starting out with ATP PCR or adenosine triphosphate phosphocreatine, this energy system is used for short, intense bursts of energy. Think of a quick sprint, for example. This phosphogen system uses phosphocreatine or PC, which is basically just a phosphate group attached to a creatine molecule, as the fuel for ATP production. This accounts for 10 to 15 seconds of activity, and fuel for this process is used very quickly. It is an anaerobic process, which means that the fuel for this is coming from stored ATP in the muscle. ATP lasts for about 4 to 6 seconds, and then ATP buffers the ATP, which helps it to last for another 10-ish seconds. Once all the ATP stores are used up here, we move on to the glycolytic system. The glycolytic system relies on the rapid breakdown of carbohydrates. This system mainly uses the glucose molecules, which are constantly circulating the bloodstream, as well as glycogen, which is a stored version of glucose in the muscles as a way to quickly gain more energy. This is also stored in the liver. Glycolysis occurs gaining 2 ATP. This process has some byproducts, lactate and hydrogen ions. These 2 substances are thought to be the culprits for the burning sensation you might feel in your muscles. This is also an anaerobic process and feels a little more high-intensity activity at 3 to 60 seconds. Think of a 200-yard dash. The third system is oxidative system. This is an exercise that lasts for anything longer than 2 minutes of continuous activity and is used for endurance activities such as long bike rides or runs. There is a little limit to the system as theoretically it could sustain your activity for as long as you'd like. This process accounts for a very slow production of ATP, but it can be produced and sustain energy for much longer periods of time. It is an aerobic process utilizing the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. If ATP started to run low and your body needed to make more, it could potentially start to break down fat and protein stores. But the process to break these down takes even longer, so it's only used if doing something tedious, such as a marathon. When it comes to using this information practically, we should start thinking about how we can use our ATP effectively and what training adaptations might affect this. Exercise to build ATP is based on intensity, length, and volume, which are all effective in improving mitochondrial respiratory capacity, which is vital for the rate of ATP synthesis and overall metabolic health. Something else to consider within training adaptations are people who struggle with getting oxygen while exercising, such as people with asthma or a condition called ILO, which is exercise-induced laryngeal obstruction. The less oxygen your body can intake while working out could definitely affect the ability for your aerobic respiration to happen at a level that works as effectively as other athletes. Therefore, the less oxygen, the less aerobic respiration, and the less quickly ATP can be produced. Moving on, another vital aspect of energy production is nutrition. Eating the right foods will help your metabolic health. One thing that I've seen is to take a creatine supplement. Taking creatine will increase its presence within the muscle up 20 to 40%, making it easier for ADP to find the phosphate group attached to creatine. Remember phosphocreatine to make ATP faster in the ATP PCR stage. Another important part of nutrition is eating enough food. Protein, carbs, and fats are essential, or else your body cannot use these stores if it needs to. Athletes who are concerned about body image, like ballerinas, gymnasts, etc., can actually completely change their performances if their bodies don't have these stores necessary to make ATP. Also, eating enough allows your body to break down the food into healthy sugars, so your body has a good blood glucose level and enough stored glycogen in your liver and muscles. One of the most important parts of being an athlete is recovery. Giving your body the time it needs to recover is essential. When doing high-intensity workouts, you need at least 2 to 5 minutes in between those intense reps in order to replenish the ATP stores. After long workouts like running, biking, etc., you need to rest for long periods of time. Your body needs time to break down the lactic acid you might have built up and let your muscles rebuild their ATP and glucose stores. Eating and drinking water after you work out is also an important aspect of recovery, as it can help replenish the glucose and ATP stores and flush out waste or toxins created while working out. In conclusion, let's review what we've talked about and learned. We learned what ATP is and how important it is within biological activity. We also reviewed the cellular respiration cycle and how it is vital to the amount of energy an athlete can produce. Then we looked at aerobic and anaerobic respiration and how the body uses these different respiration based on the environment. We also touched on oxygen debt and lactic acid and how these affect the body as an athlete working out. We then covered the 3 main energy cycles in the muscle and how different lengths of activity affect the amount of ATP or oxygen needed in order to make those performances work. We then looked at this information practically and how we can apply it to real-life activity. I think overall this project has really helped me to gain a deeper understanding of how my body produces energy, and it makes me grateful that my body can produce the energy it needs every single day without me even realizing it. Here are my references for those of you who maybe want to look a little deeper into this. Thank you for watching.